Who is a more serious title contender? The Oklahoma City Thunder or the Minnesota Timberwolves? We'll start with Logan.
I am amidst the YouTube video in which I'm actually working on a take similar to this. For me, it's Minnesota, and as it stands, Minnesota is my number 2 team out west right now. And the reason for that, again, this is subject to change because I think the Warriors and Lakers both need to make major trade deadline moves depending on how they reconfigure their roster. Again, they could still jump up in there. I'm skeptical about the Clippers, Suns, and Kings for two-way value stuff like that. And I really believe in this defense and their ability to slow down any Western Conference foe that they run into. And I think when you look at Minnesota, the majority of the losses that they have suffered this year, it's been down to really 3 reasons. And again, you can blanket statement these keys for a lot of NBA games, but it's been evident with Minnesota. It's lackadaisical turnovers, it's poor effort defensively, and it's been red hot shooting nights from their opponents. 5 of the 7 losses that Minnesota has suffered has been when a team has had a true shooting percentage of 60% or better. Again, you can make that mostly, again, a blanket statement for a lot of losses the team suffer, but it's been evident with Minnesota. The one advantage I will give Oklahoma City concretely over Minnesota at this point is their half-court offense creation and their just depth of weapons offensively. I think that really could be the marginal difference in a series that, Karl-Anthony Towns is going to have to pull his weight. Anthony Edwards is going to have to consistently reach that superstar level, which he has done on big stages, but that's still the biggest variable here. When Oklahoma City, SGA can have an off night, and Chet can take over, knocking down shots, getting to the rack. He's so good. Jalen Williams dropped, 36 the other night. He's a 90th percentile isolation player this season. An isolation possession from Jalen Williams is worth 1.24 points. That's absurd. He's a 72nd percentile pick and roll ball handler. Like point blank, Minnesota just does not have the depth of offensive weapons that Oklahoma City does. And Oklahoma City is a damn good defense too. So I guess I'm going to say I want to hit the pause button here because I want one more month. I think Oklahoma City and Minnesota, like Golden State and LA, need to do something at the deadline. I think the majority of teams across the league need to make a move to get marginally better at the deadline. Oklahoma City finding a secondary or tertiary offensive weapon, another one to put them over the top. I know both of you guys have discussed Lauri Markkanen would be awesome if they could make a swing for him with their picks. And then I think Minnesota needs to make another swing too to put themselves over the top to keep pace because, again, I think they have the defensive personnel and the physical advantages to stifle LA, to limit Denver just a little bit to open the door, but they are just in a different class offensively than Denver. Denver is in a different tier. So for me, I think Minnesota, I like Minnesota more because of their defensive ceiling, but they have to make a move at the deadline. I'm shopping Kyle Anderson, NAW. I'm shopping Shake Milton, Troy Brown Jr. and picks, like whatever move I can make to get another bench piece or another option offensively to give me easy offense come playoff time is what I'm doing. But I think I'm just marginally like Minnesota more because of their defensive consistency. But Oklahoma City is a damn good contender too. I legit buy into both of these teams potentially making a playoff run.
Yeah, I love both of these teams. I am so high on the Thunder. I think this is as bright a future from a young team as we have seen since, shocker, the Thunder just over a decade ago when they had Harden, Russ, and KD. Sam Presti, man, I hope that he gets his ring because he is as brilliant a player evaluator as we have seen in this league. He just nails draft pick after draft pick after draft pick, and he makes very good value trades. But at some point, you got to put it all together and get that ring and reach the actual apex of the sport. I mean, Jason, you remember I was crazy high on Chet as a prospect. I said he was the best guy who I'd ever been able to really evaluate. I love Shai. I think Jalen is even underrated. Like, I think he's a perennial 3rd star. He is rarely good for a second-year guy. They're awesome. But right now, it's Minnesota. I think there's a few concrete reasons for that. Number one is how well they match up physically against the big elite teams in the West. I think that is going to be a very important component just with the way that the best teams in the league have gone. You are looking at big, athletic, strong front courts, and Minnesota is the epitome of that with their 2 big looks, and they're just really athletic all around with Jaden McDaniels and Anthony Edwards. And OKC is very athletic, but in the front court, they're slight. They're 29th in rebound rate this year. And I think teams like the Nuggets, the Lakers can expose that. Chet is an unbelievable pure rim protector, his timing, his length, and all that. But He's not an elite rebounding 5. And I just think that level of strength really presents problems for OKC on the interior. Whereas Minnesota, they have as good a formula for guarding a Nikola Jokic as anybody does in the league. Put Cat on him, that's a really big body. You have Gobert there and help. They're going to match up on the glass against anybody. I think that matters in playoff scenarios, especially looking at the competition out west. I also think they have a depth advantage. It's good for both these teams, but they are 7 deep with damn good players. And we talk about the lack of redundancies. I think Minnesota's put together a really nice complementary basketball team. I had offensive concerns about playing Cat alongside a true 5, but I think that you are looking at a lot of guys who fill specific roles. Gobert as this defensive anchor, Cat as a guy who can help defend on the interior and then can do various things offensively, attacking mismatches, killing you with his shooting. Jaden is just this awesome 3-and-D wing. Ant is your go out there number 1 sort of offensive option from the perimeter. Awesome athlete. And then Conley is just this high level facilitator, smart veteran guy, going to shoot the ball really well. So on top of this big 3 they have of star level guys, they've got 2 really good, almost perfect role players in the starting 5. And then Kyle Anderson and Naz Reid are super valuable bench pieces. You just have a versatile 2-way guy in Anderson, and then as explosive a scoring bench big as there is in the league in Naz Reid. Whereas I look at OKC and I'm like, boy, I love Kayson off the bench. I love Isaiah Joe off the bench. Those guys are really good. Are they as multifaceted, maybe, as some of these more veteran guys who we're talking about? That's a question. But honestly, my concerns are maybe more with a couple of the guys in the starting 5. Like, as long as Josh Giddey is closing games and playing 25 minutes a game, I think that's a problem. I just think he is not very good. And this was always my problem with him being the number 6 pick in the draft. He's in a player archetype that we haven't seen successful in the league ever. Like, his passing is awesome. But to be a really good offensive player in the NBA today, you have to be a high-level threat both as a scorer and a passer. And this is a guy who is a below-average athlete, who has bad touch, who has a broken jump shot, who is going to be a negative defensively. I mean, we're seeing it this year, right? He's giving you 11 a night on 50% true shooting. I think he takes the offense out of rhythm. I don't think he holds defenses accountable as a spot-up shooter. I think he is going to be an addition by subtraction situation if they can move off of him. And then even a guy like Lou Dort, who has been awesome this year, he is shooting the hell out of the ball. I've just seen too many times from him in the past where he gets in these stretches where it's brick after brick after brick, and that can be a question of shot selection. So I don't have the same level of faith with those 4th and 5th guys that I do with the Minnesota dudes who just excel in their roles. And then they are much more experienced. Mike Conley has been in multiple deep playoff runs, as has Kyle Anderson. Gobert has been to the second round a few times. Cat and Ant have at least been to the playoffs multiple times. Teams don't win titles when nobody on their team has real playoff experience. And that is the case for OKC. Shai has been there, sure, but he's never been there as the guy. Lou has been in 1 playoff series, and that's it. That's the entirety of the playoff experience on this roster, in this rotation, outside of Isaiah Joe being a garbage time guy in Philly. That doesn't count. There's maybe one exception historically to that rule, that being the 1977 Blazers, very young team, but overwhelmingly, it certainly helps to have been there before, to have been in those battles. And there's a physical maturity with Minnesota along with that mental maturity. I just think they scale better to a playoff setting right now, but long term, boy, I am high on what OKC can do.
Yeah, that last part is literally the take that I came into this with when I was prepping this morning. Like, I think Oklahoma City is going to be awesome for a really long time.
Yeah.
I think they aren't going to make the mistakes they made early on with James Harden. They have a lot of very specific pieces that I look at with championship contention, like diversity of shot creation, diversity of defensive scheme that they can run. They like Chet Holmgren, I think legitimately has the potential to be the best player in the world one day. Like they have so much upside. It's not even funny, but there's just 2 big red flags for me. Like the Western Conference is huge on the front line and they are tiny. And everything we know about NBA history tells us that the longer you get into a playoff series, that's where physical matchups matter more and more. I know I'm in some trouble with Thunder fans because I did my power rankings before the Minnesota win. And I said, I don't think Oklahoma City is capable of beating Minnesota, LA, or Denver 4 times out of 7 because of the front line size mismatches.
Mhm.
And then they beat the shit out of Minnesota. And of course I look silly.
Of course.
But genuinely speaking, when you get to the playoffs and you get into a 7-game setting, the whistle gets a little tighter. It becomes a more physical game. I just am worried about them on the front line. And then that second piece of it is like, I mean, shout out to the 1977 Blazers, but
Shout out to them.
but like kids don't win in the NBA. They just don't. They sometimes kids make some noise, but kids don't win in the NBA. And when they do, it's like 26, 27 years old, and they're surrounded by vets usually at that point. This team has not just a lack of championship experience, they have a lack of playoff experience, I should say. They have a lack of basketball experience. These are all kids. These are young basketball players. And so when I look at that, those are just giant red flags for me that say like, hey, listen to what NBA history tells you. Doesn't mean they can't win. It just means they would be beating the odds. It's kind of like, and for the record, the counterpoint there is what happened with Denver last year. We have not in recent NBA history. It had been decades since we saw a non-defending champion, non-top 10 defense be able to, win the NBA championship, and they won comfortably and often on the strength of their defense. So like literally it can be done. It's just, I think Denver is more of the exception to the rule. And we also have to account for the fact that Jokic is the best player in the world right now. And as good as Shai is, I don't believe he is. Looking at Minnesota, they have a big red flag too that I always look at, which is they're really bad at half court offense. In general, like when things get super physical, like having a bunch of guys that are capable of really high level closeout attacking and having 2 really high end shot creators are really important. And I'm not saying that Ant's not capable of that, but that certainly is a concern for me. But to your point, Carson, they have 2 massive green flags, which is they have a lot of experience and they're huge. And those are just 2 very, very important pieces to a playoff run. I don't view either of them as top tier contenders. I still only think Boston and Denver are capable of saying like, hey, we have like a really good chance of winning this year. I think everybody else is like long shot chance pending a good trade. Like, and where a good trade could potentially vault them into that next level. But yeah, again, it's not an anti-Oklahoma City take. I have a ton of fun watching Oklahoma City. Dude, Jalen Williams was cooking the New York Knicks last night. Cooking them. Like he was pulling Taj Gibson out into switches and barbecuing him. He was utilizing the pick and pop with Chet Holmgren and getting open looks. He started picking on Julius Randle in switches. Like the kid is insanely good. And he's on a stretch here just in the last like couple of weeks. He's really turned up the scoring volume and efficiency. Last 9 games, Jalen Williams, 20 points per game, 57% from the field, 53% from 3, 86% from the line. And Logan, you mentioned his isolation numbers, which have been off the charts. Like they are freaking awesome. It's just, this is not their year. I think they'll give somebody a really tough fight. They'll have some moments where they win a game in OKC and you're like, man, these guys are going to be a problem for a long time. But just game 5, game 6, game 7, it's just going to be the bigger, stronger teams that kind of wear them down. I know they've had some success against the bigger teams in a regular season sample, but I do think that they've probably been one of the best effort and consistency teams this year, which is obviously good, which is like, they're like to me a much better version of the Memphis Grizzlies team from the last couple of years that was really good in the regular season, but I wasn't as optimistic about their high-end long-term potential.